hi, Peter.
Hey, Franklin.
Hey, Franklin. Yeah, it's me, right there. Can you please state who you are?
Sure. I am Peter Corless, and I've been a resident here in Mountain View since I first came out in 1989. I've moved around a couple of places in the Bay Area, but came back to Mountain View to stay. I'm just doing it as a stake in the ground. I believe that we all have at least 5 minutes of fame. And for this interview, I've already had more than 5 minutes. I'm looking and doing this to get others incented to give their own commitments, just like Greg has given his. Greg, when I read his book, it was in a time in my life like Greg had this great failure in his life. For him, it was climbing K2 and not getting to the top. For me, it was a period in my life near the end of July to the early parts of August of 2008 where I began the process of becoming a human being. My Macintosh had its key broken, my cell phone was crashing, and my Saturn station wagon needed to be taken into the shop. So just as Greg had failed in what he was trying to do, climbing the mountains, I felt like technology had just kind of taken the wind out of my sails. So just as Greg had failed in what he was trying to do, climbing the mountains, I felt like technology had just kind of taken the wind out of my sails. But it really hadn't. It gave me back a new life. And in those 8 days offline, I founded the Global Understanding Institute after taking the time to read Greg Mortenson's book, 3 Cups of Tea. I read it and I was like, this is exactly what I've been working towards. I knew it. I was just too frightened to actually do it. Greg inspired me when he had the fatwa declared against him, and he said, I'm going to do it. We're just going to deal with this pragmatically. Who's the guy who declared my death sentence? It's an incredible act of bravery. I guess that's what you do when you get pragmatic and you're climbing up and down mountains, and if you just do it badly, you're going to die. So, okay, I'm going to die if I do this badly, so where's the fatwa coming from? And when I read that, I was like, all right, if he can do it, I can do it too. And something I had been working on since 2005 and 2006, I decided to commit to full-time. And in fact, it had been an idea I'd been noodling around ever since I formed my own publishing company, about the Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur. I knew that the modern world needed heroes. And so I founded Green Knight Publishing in 1998 with the hope that by playing a role-playing game, young men and women around the world would learn ethics and civics, and through indirect teaching, be able to enter into society and change the world. But you should never confuse a game or a simulation for the thing itself. And when I read Greg's book, I realized I didn't need to use a trope. I didn't need to use the myth of King Arthur. The world was here and waiting. And something I had been working on since 2005 and 2006, I decided to commit to full-time. I had been working on a number of different projects, and they didn't have a theme. It was like Beethoven's Ninth, when he's trying to think about what the overall theme is going to be in his 4th movement. He keeps on coming up with these ideas, and he almost dashes them musically. And so one of those ideas that I had was Razumien, which was to understand the falling apart of the Balkans. I knew that the modern world needed heroes. But you should never confuse a game or a simulation for the thing itself. And when I read Greg's book, I realized I didn't need to use a trope. I didn't need to use the myth of King Arthur. The world was here and waiting. Other projects I wanted to do was something having to do with Iraq, something to do with having to do with Somalia, something to do with Afghanistan. Each of these places in the world, each of these conflict zones, 99.99% of the people are not at war. The vast majority of these people are peaceable people. So I wanted to address what was going on there, what was fomenting the crisis. My project Razumian, and so in 2006 I went over to Croatia to the small town of Vukovar to understand what had happened there. And I also, this cap here is from the peace train I rode in 2006 on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I didn't want to just go overseas and think like all the problems in the world are overseas. I knew that there are problems with racism and there are problems with social crises in America. No one's really shooting like that. There is crime in America, but there's no open warfare. So we have domestic crises, now the economic crisis. That I hadn't even thought about when I started in August. We have the economic crisis, we have housing crises and homelessness crises, we have health crises. All these crises in America. And overseas, we're exacerbating the crisis they're having by the crisis we're having at home. We're in a symbiotic relationship. And I realized that while Greg's over there doing his quest to teach children one student at a time, one school at a time, we have to support him domestically in the United States. Because if nobody cares, if nobody even wants to pick up Greg's book, and fortunately a lot of people do, but so many people in America don't know where Pakistan is, they don't know where Afghanistan is, they've seen it on a map, they kind of seen it on TV, they go, oh, poor pity them, isn't that terrible? They don't really understand these countries the way Greg does. I don't even understand them. I have not stood in those nations. I've stood in other nations in the world, but he understands the crisis going on there, and so he's the best capable of reporting on it. I figured he's not alone. There are missionaries in Africa where his parents took him as a child. There are people in Latin America. There are people in Europe. There are people in the United States. There are people in every country on the world doing work like Greg's. And the only way we're going to care about any of them is if they get a better visibility and if we understand what their communities are all about. So when Haji Ali says, well, what do you know what the people need if you don't ask them? I think that this is a brilliant statement by a very wise gentleman. We have to start turning to our communities and asking what they're looking for. What do their governments not provide them? What do their businesses not provide them? What do their families not provide them? And what do they need most now? So in the United States, even in California, even in Mountain View, each one of these communities has a different agenda of what they feel they need most. And I wanted to allow, with the Global Understanding Institute, a way for communities to broadcast what they think is important. See, I think that what we need to do is come up with educational systems that will make people better educated gentlemen and women around the world. So I'm learning Spanish, I'm taking a dance class for tango, I'm learning fencing, because a properly educated gentleman can get his point across without hurting anyone. So in fact, I'm going to have to wrap up this interview because it's getting close to 6 o'clock and my class is down at Homestead High School.
And it's getting close to 10 minutes too.
Exactly. So I want to thank you, Franklin. And please, come to globalunderstandinginstitute.org. I've changed my life for you, Greg. I hope you're watching the video because I just want to say thank you. You're my hero.
Thanks to you too, I made him.
Bye-bye.